Welcome to this very special episode of Unraveling Adoption. This is a space where we intentionally delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of an insightful and delightful son, Joey Nakao, and he co-wrote the brand new book that we are just releasing today called Adoption and Suicidality. It's an anthology of stories, poems, and resources for adoptees, families, healthcare professionals, and allies. And it is released today, August 12th, 2024, on Amazon as an ebook, print book, and audiobook. So today's episode is going to include conversations with several of our collaborators. First, I talk with Joey about his part of the book and his impetus and his hopes for the book. Then we talk with 7 of our contributors, 7 out of the 14, and they each share a little bit about who they are, why they participated in the book, and they each read a little portion of their piece in the book. Just a gentle reminder, if this topic is not a good topic for you today, please skip it. I want to make sure everyone stays safe. If any of you are feeling suicidal, or if you know somebody who is, I beg you to call 988 if you're in the US. If you're in another country, hopefully they have some sort of crisis line that you can call. Please stay safe. Take breaks as you listen and or read our book, and just do take good care of yourself. This is a heavy, heavy topic, and just give yourself some gentle empathy as we dive in. So I hope you enjoy this composite episode. It will inform you about the book and help you understand what the book's about. And perhaps you can think about who in your world needs this book. So check it out on Amazon, Adoption and Suicidality. And first up, you're going to hear a conversation with me and my son, Joey. I'm very glad you're here today, Joey, to talk to us about the book. What would you like to say about the book?
Well, I'm just really proud of you, my mom, for doing this. It's a accomplishment that I never thought would be, but I just didn't think it would happen. It was not in my mind that a book would come out from our experiences and our tribulations, you know?
Yeah. And when we think back to February of 2019, when you had your first hospitalization, could you have imagined then all we would have learned and that we would have turned that around into writing a book?
I would never have thought. It was just survival mode.
Yeah, literally. But we have done a lot of work, and we both don't want it to just end here. We don't want it to just end, yeah, that sucked. This has been really hard. We want to turn it around, to transform it, to create something else out of it. And that feels oddly satisfying.
Yes.
It doesn't really take away the pain, but it makes it feel like, okay, well, if this helps somebody else, that makes it a lot better.
Yeah, and it's destigmatizing it by stating it. Like the idea of suicidality and adoption, both of those are pretty heavy topics for people. Just talking about it in this book is destigmatizing it, demystifying it, I guess.
Just getting that word suicide out there to talk about in the public discourse in a relatively safe way, in a container where we can talk about suicide in a way that gives people resources and access to help, I feel can make it better for people.
Yes, because if you talk about it, you can then teach people about it. If it's not talked about, you can't educate anyone about it.
Yes. And I've noticed even before the books come out, while we're recording this, people that have been reading the advanced copies of it, or who have even just seen little quotes here and there from it, they're like, whoa, thank you for talking about this. I also have had suicidal ideation, and I thought I was crazy, or I thought I was the only one, or I thought I didn't have a right to feel that bad, or I thought whatever. And there's been so many people that have approached me and said how grateful they are just to bring it up, even just the title of the book. So how does that make you feel, Joey, that we're transforming this? And what is it doing for you? Is it helping you?
It's giving me a purpose. I lived what I wrote. So it's like a reminder of like, I'm not that person anymore, and not in a bad way, but like I'm healing. Not healed, but I'm healing.
Yes, right. Has anyone ever truly healed all the way? I don't know. I don't think so, unless you're enlightened. but most people are on a healing path, right?
Yeah.
And you've come a long way since 2019, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's been a long time since you've even had a lot of suicidal ideation.
Yeah, and that could be due to meds, and then that's another topic. But yeah, mental health is very tough.
It is tough. And it is a combination of meds, therapy, groups, connection. You've had a lot of learnings through different places that you've gone and people you've seen that have helped you, reading, meditating, all the things. It all adds up to the healing path.
Yeah.
And whatever combination is working and is helping you feel better, yay.
Yes.
How was it for you to write your story out and to really relive some of those experiences? How was that experience for you?
For me, it was easy at first, but then when I looked back and started editing it, it was like, whoa, I don't know what happened. Like, it felt like I broke because of my mental health. I was not getting enough help. There's a lot of things happening and I didn't have the tools and I just broke, and I didn't have the people around me that knew what to do and the feelings I had. And then this idea in my head of taking my life was the solution. It's not the solution.
Yeah, well, I certainly didn't know very much at all when you were super in crisis when you were younger. And it seems like the people that were supposed to help us often made things worse until we found a couple of people that really, really helped us. But it's about, can you find those people that will be compassionate and empathetic and give you useful tools, or will they bring you more shame and more heartache? So
yeah, it's tough because the stigma around it could affect different people. Some people can not believe the stigma or understand it more, causing them to teach the understanding of this weighted topic better. But if you are uneducated and go with the stigma, it causes more trauma.
Oh, yeah. It can make things worse. I wonder if you'd be willing to read part of your writing.
Okay. I was not happy to go to the psych hospital. The social worker made it sound a lot better than it turned out to be. I don't think he really understood mental health at all. He was just focusing on the fact that I use drugs, not on my mental health. If you don't turn yourself around, you'll be like those homeless people on the street. Your life will go nowhere if you continue on these drugs. He was trying to scare me out of using drugs and wasn't addressing the underlying mental health needs.
Yeah, that part breaks my heart.
Yeah.
About how much shame they pushed on you. And they weren't really going, oh my gosh, you must really be in pain if you're using drugs to cover up whatever pain you're feeling. How about looking at that?
I think the most traumatic experience that I had was the doctor just saying, you're doing this all for attention, basically. That scarred me.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're invalidating your feelings or what you need.
This is a very big low point. So October 2022 is the last time I took you to the hospital. And what happened there, and the story's in the book, but what happened there is that they told you, after waiting for hours and hours and hours, they said, oh yeah, we're going to probably send you home. And they came back about an hour later and they said, oh, never mind, we're going to put you on a hold, which means 72 hours in a psych hospital, kind of like jail. You can't get out.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Then I got really agitated to a point of threatening people. But besides that, I punched a hole in the wall out of anger. Then they restrained me to a bed, which gave this doctor, I think, a chance to tell me with a little bit less filter that I was doing a lot of this just for attention rather than having mental health issues. So like, it was really messed up.
Yeah. He was the hospital chief and he came and yelled at you for punching a hole in the wall.
He's like, this is my hospital. You can't be doing that. Like, I was like, what? Okay.
Yeah. And, he knew that you were in the psych part of the ER, that you were there for suicidal ideation.
He said, like, I know you type of kids or something like that. He was like, okay.
You're just doing it for attention.
Yeah, you're assuming the hell out of, like, whoa.
Yeah, that was a really, really terrible time. And they kicked me out right away out into the lobby. And then
for safety,
I guess they just didn't want me to see what was going to happen. And I didn't know if they were going to take you away, arrest you. I didn't know what happens when you do that in the ER. They're like, no, he's a patient. We're taking care of him. And so you didn't get in trouble, luckily. And they even x-rayed your hand, I think.
Yeah, they did.
So that was really terrible. Terrible service at a hospital that is supposed to be helping you. And then they did put you on a hold, and nothing ever happened. Nothing changed. Nothing got helped. Nothing. So we just started back at square one.
No, it really ended up derailing me again.
Yeah. I think after that, you got on a different medication, which very well could have helped you. Is there anything else that's been helping you? Because you haven't had a big suicidal incident since then.
I'm thinking like just growing up is another thing, is because I kind of like understand that my life is not a throwaway kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So just maturity.
I have enough worth that I'm keeping my life. I get fearful of my life being taken.
Okay.
It's a very big anxiety, and I think that's because I'm healing.
Yeah. You actually care about living now more. Yeah, I think just growing up does help. And you have gotten lots of resources and helpers and counselors along the way. So I think all of it adds up.
Yeah, and then the meds, growing up, meds and talking about it really is like the main things for me. Growing up, not like just in age, but in knowledge.
Yes. Well, and hopefully with this book, you're going to have lots of chances to go talk to more people.
Yeah.
We have lots of speaking engagements coming up, and I hope that you will take advantage of those opportunities to keep destigmatizing, keep raising your voice, letting other adoptees know that it's not uncommon to have suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, and that there is a healing path, and that talking about it is part of what will help, and being with other adoptees and being with other people that understand it will help. So I am grateful for you, Joy. I'm grateful that you're willing to share your story and that you helped me write this book.
No, thank you. I really am appreciative that you kind of dragged me by my foot in a good way, like kind of the inside out kind of thing. Is like you got the person that I could be out of me.
Yeah.
And I really thank you. And we have a beautiful product, I think. I'm trying not to be biased. Like, it's a beautiful product for something that is our first of, you know?
Yeah, it's only the first of the series for sure. What do you have to say? Maybe there's a 15-year-old adopted kid that picks up our book. What do you want to say to them right now?
You're worth the stars. You are worth more than money can buy. You are loved by the universe. If you are struggling by feeling not loved, you are loved by someone, and you should know that. I am very happy to be a part of your journey of healing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, honey.
Just stay safe, please.
And now I'm going to be in conversation with 7 of our book's contributors. Here are the 7 in order of the book. Dr. Joyce Maguire Pavao, who wrote the foreword, Bruce Porth, Janell Strube, Laura Ingle, Lorraine Dusky, Terry Dreismeyer, and Melissa Brunetti. And here are the others that weren't able to join us for this podcast, but who also are in the book. Etta Ridgehouse, Pamela Karanova, Kylie Flynn, Anthony Hines, Jody Moore, Greg Rostron, and Anessa Pfeiffer. Thank you all for your contributions to the book. And now let's get to know those 7 a little bit better. Let me say thank you very much for all of you to be here, and for goodness sakes for being a part of the book. I'm just so honored and humbled by your contributions, and I realize how tough a topic this is, and you all are willing to go out there and talk about it, which I feel is so important. Well, first, let's find out who's here with us from contributors who helped me with the book. So let's introduce ourselves. So Dr. Joyce, would you like to just introduce yourself and your role in the adoption constellation and your role in the book?
Sure. I'm Dr. Joyce Maguire Pavao, and I'm an adopted person and also a professional. I've been working in the field for 55 years and trying to make changes in a very flawed practice, to say the least. And Beth, you asked me if I would write a foreword, and I didn't know what to do at first. I like you very much, and I liked your book, but I thought, I've been so upset by so many stories that are, the worst possible stories, but they're the ones that really need to be told.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joyce. Thanks for writing the foreword. And now let's hear from the other contributors to that middle section of the book. And let's start with Melissa.
I am Melissa Brunetti, and I am from California. I am an adoptee, and I have a adoptee-focused podcast called Mind Your Own Karma. And I had some suicidal thoughts from being adopted and the complexities of that. Yeah, I did struggle. So I'm hoping to help others and kind of validate others' experiences.
Yeah, so important. Thank you so much for being here. How about Janell? Would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Janell Strube, and I am from California as well. I'm an adoptee, and I'm also an adoptive parent. I was a foster parent, and my experience with suicide comes from my own suicidal ideations as a child, and not only as a child, but as a grown-up as well, and also on my son's mental health crises as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing your voice here. Okay, Bruce, would you like to go next?
I'm Bruce Porth. I am from Vermont, and I am a domestic same-race adoptee, adopted in Chicago and grew up there and in Houston, Texas. And, I've been kind of haunted through the years by suicidal ideation and, never really finding a way through it or out of it until really just over the past 2 or 3 years.
Thank you very much for being here and sharing that important story. And we're just grateful for your voice here too, Bruce. Thank you very much. Okay, Laura, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Laura Engel, and I'm originally from Mississippi, but I've lived in California for 56 years. So I'm a Californian now. But I am a birth mother who gave birth to my son as a teenager in 1967 in an unwed mother's home in New Orleans, Louisiana. And my son and I reunited in 2016, and it was the most miraculous, wonderful thing of my life and his, and it was so great. But 4.5 years later, my son committed suicide and broke all of us, because after losing him the second time, it was just almost unbearable. It changed me.
I can only attempt to imagine how difficult that must have been for you. It continues to be, Laura. Thank you for being here and for sharing this important part of your life with us, and so we can all better understand somehow.
Thank you.
Yeah. Not that you understand either. I suppose understanding may not be the right word, but it's important for us to hear. All right, Dusky, would you like to go next?
My name is Lorraine Dusky, and I gave up a child for adoption in 1966. And I knew at the time, basically, that somehow what I was doing was the wrong thing, even though my situation and society and the father of the child all said it was the right thing to do. It turned out not to be. But there was a poem that I had written partially. This is the beginning of the poem that I wrote a couple of years after she was born, maybe like a year. Some part of me always knew that giving up my child was wrong. I made clear when I wrote Hell in My Heart that I never really thought I would be a mother or have children. And because I wanted to be a writer, and not being wealthy, I didn't see how I could combine the two in my era, especially since journalism was what I was after. But once she was born, I just knew giving her away was wrong. Anyway, my daughter survived for many years, but she would make jokes about suicide. I mean, she would say, live fast, die young, be a good looking corpse. I mean, it became kind of a thing, she said. And then my daughter did try several times, and she had been hospitalized. Her stomach had been pumped. I mean, so all of us were like trying to keep it together for her. And when I got the phone call that she had died by her own hand, it's always a shock. I mean, I couldn't help it. I mean, I just felt, you succeeded at last. She really did not want to continue with her life with all of these problems that she had that had to do with so many things that happened in her life. I mean, adoption was just the beginning. So many things piled on in her life. And then she also gave up a child for adoption, which was really hard for me to take after being involved in this. It was like, oh my God, even I couldn't stop this. So she died in 2007 or 8. I sometimes even forget, it was December 12th. And I know because it was just before Christmas.
Thank you so much for being here, Dusky, and for bringing your important story and perspective to this conversation. Okay, Terry, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Terry Dreismeyer. I actually originally grew up on the East Coast, relocated to Iowa many years ago. I lost my son to suicide April 12th, 2023. So it's just been a little over a year. He was adopted from Korea. My entire perspective about things have really changed. And my healing journey is going to be his voice and my voice coming together to help others. Adam was in graduate school. His goal was to heal beyond medicine. He wanted to be a holistic health person, and I'm going to help him heal that.
Terry, thank you for being here. Thank you so much. I'm realizing we don't talk about suicide very much. Do any of you have any comments or response to just being in this space together? Laura, go ahead.
I think this is very important because, as you said, Beth, people do not talk about it. And it was my first experience with suicide, and I had never talked about it before. And it's been 3 years now. It took me a good 3 years to be able to talk about it. And in doing so, it's been so healing and so powerful. And I feel it's important to honor my son. And I did write a book about my experience, but his suicide happened when I had signed with a publisher, and I almost didn't publish the book. But 6 months later, I decided to go ahead and do it in honor of him. And I wanted that story told, and I wanted to be able to talk about it. So I could write about it, but now I can finally talk about it. So I'm so grateful to have this space, this safe place to go and be able to talk about it.
That's how I'm looking at it. We collective as a voice, we have to come together. That's why I went back to graduate school again. I'm learning how to tell his story. It's what he would have wanted.
It feels like this topic has always been taboo and extremely difficult to talk about. And it's especially important, I think, within the adoptee community to open up the dialogue and find safe spaces where we can talk about it. A big part of my own ideation has been this feeling of isolation and aloneness with the feelings. And that can just propagate the severity of it. So, Beth, I applaud you for creating this space, and the space for the writing as well as the space for this conversation as well. And when Terry was just sharing her story, it just sort of hit me in the chest like, oh, right, this isn't abstract. This is real. And I had the same experience recently at the Untangling Our Roots conference out in Denver, watching Rich Erlob's musical that he did and performed there at the conference for the first time. And there was a young Korean adoptee in that story who takes his own life. And sitting in the audience, watching that, taking it in, it just about knocked me over at that point in the story. And it was much later in the evening, after I was back in my room and I couldn't sleep. Just the grief just kind of overcame me at the realization of what happens within our community in way too many cases.
Yes. I played the piano for that performance, and I chatted with that actor ahead of time. And he says, oh yeah, I was hired from Chicago to Denver because they couldn't find an Asian to play. And it's important that character was Asian. I'm like, okay, thank you for being an Asian young man, because I have one of those. And I'm like, please do this for my son. Please represent my son. I really appreciate that. So, oh God, thank you. I don't know if there's ever been a space where everyone in the adoption constellation has come together in real time to talk about suicide. Like the weight of this is just hitting me. It seems like it might be hitting a few of you. It's intense and so important, because as we know, or maybe as we know now, talking about suicide does not make people die by suicide more frequently. It's the opposite is the case. So if we can use our courage and our willingness to talk about this, God, I literally hope that this book saves lives. That's all I want to do with this book. Like just that one small thing. And I really think it already is, just with the 17 of us churning this material around for the last couple of months. I think we are already making an impact. And God, I hope. Anyone else just want to share what's going on for you? Or
I just want to validate how hard it is to hold space, even though we've all, been touched by it in one way or another. It's still difficult to even hold space for, ourselves and each other. And it's just so important that we do educate the world about this. I didn't know this was a thing, even though I struggled with it. I didn't know it was an adoptee thing until I got in the community, and was like, oh my gosh, the light bulb goes off,
Yeah.
So I think just even validating that for other adoptees and so that they know that there's hope, that they're not alone.
Yeah.
That's huge right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to have a reason for these feelings either. At times, I know from my own experience, they just kind of have a life of their own. I don't know anything that necessarily triggers them. It's never entirely been clear to me. I've had plenty of days where all of a sudden I find myself on the roller coaster, and I may not be totally equipped to be on the roller coaster, and it's just a matter of hanging on, in desperation.
Yeah. The shoulder harness might not even be working right now at that day, but you just hang on with all your might.
One reason this has been so amazing for me to be part of this group and others has been, as a birth mother, I always felt such pain and such aloneness because I couldn't talk about what had happened. It was such a big secret in my life because you're ashamed, you're grieving alone. And this sounds terrible, but I'm going to say it. I didn't realize how hard it was for adoptees. I knew about my pain, but I was naive about theirs. And it took my son's death for me to learn more. And the more I learned about suicide and adoption, the more, of course, I went down the rabbit hole of feeling what if, which I then learned that, whether I had raised my son or not, if it had been the ones I raised, it would still be that mother thing, that what did I not do? What did I say wrong? How could I have not known? So it's been very educational as well as helped my heart to heal, but it also expanded my heart to think of all the adoptees in the world, all the birth mothers, all the adoptive parents that are going through this. And I think it's so important that we talk about it to everybody, not just people in the adoption triad, because the people that are outside really don't have a clue.
Laura, I agree with you there. I didn't even know there were resources out there until it took Adam's death. I'm going to the Korean culture camp in August. They've asked me to come and speak in Pella. I'm going to try, but I didn't even know it existed. I would have sent Adam. I would have done anything to get him help.
Yeah. Whose hands do you hope this book gets into?
I'm like Laura, everyone that we can reach out to. Well, I already talked to our therapist. She's going to help us because we need therapists to understand the adoption process and what it does. They don't. I don't think the person Adam saw really understood him being a Korean adoptee. He was going to start, but it didn't work out. He took his life right before his first official appointment.
Oh, for therapy.
She had deemed him safe to go home.
Oh, he hadn't even started therapy. He just had done an intake or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think the physician understood him either. I'm not convinced that the Lexapro didn't push him.
We've certainly had our share of people telling us, oh, the adoption has nothing to do with any of this. He was a baby. How could that have anything to do with anything? Yeah.
In hindsight, and the more I've studied this, in hindsight, I realized things that were said by my son that went right over my head.
Yeah, me too.
I was so blinded by the fact that we were having such a great reunion as the years went on.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it as forever.
Sure.
But how? I kept thinking, how can this be so good? And I was so afraid it would end. And then when it ended in the worst possible way. I never would have thought this could happen. But everyone kept telling him how lucky he was because he'd been raised by such wonderful people, which was true. He had been. But I wish I'd have known that, when he said things like, I was the best thing ever happened to him, when he said that he couldn't believe how much we were alike, which was true. Like he came out for holidays and he said, this is the way I always envisioned holidays to be. All these little things that made me realize later, after the fact, he was still lonely in so many ways that therapy had not helped those ways. I couldn't help that. because I didn't know how bad it was. So this needs to be, people need to open up the conversation. And I've already talked to so many people that have said, you've helped me to understand it. Plus, one of the best things that was ever said to me was one of my writing friends immediately, after we talked about this, called her daughter and got help for her daughter because she wasn't taking her daughter serious.
Oh, wow.
You know, I just think everyone should read this book, and I think everyone should be able to just speak freely, whether people want to hear it or not.
Adam's biological mother, at least from the story we were told, and again, you can only go by what you're told, she hid her pregnancy for 8 months. So he already was being fed all that cortisol in his brain. He was already not wanted. And then his first 8 months of his life, I don't even know if half of it's true now that I go back and I look at it. They put him in a shelter for 7 days. Then they finally moved him to an orphanage. Then he got really sick and he was in a NICU for 6 days.
Oof, so much we don't even know what happened to him. Wow. So much.
We don't.
Well, this trauma happens at such an early age. And, you know, for some of us, it can be daily trauma for days and days, if not months before we're placed. And we start getting some of our needs met. But I know for my own case, I think there was so much dissociation and adaptation. So as much as I, you know, presented myself to the world as a very normal functioning person, I was having to work extremely hard to maintain that appearance. And underneath that, I was dying, but I didn't have language for that. I couldn't even connect with that for so many years, let alone let anybody else in. And so, those parts remained in isolation, and there was just an incredible amount of terror associated with them. But it was hard to reach those parts and let other people in. What shifted for me was finding the broader adoptee community. And that happened about 4 years ago for me. And then I started having some of these really young parts that I couldn't bring anywhere else. I could bring them out into the surface. They could find connection, and connection equals safety.
Mm-hmm. Connection is so important. So you're saying that being in community with other adoptees particularly is part of your healing.
It's an essential and vital part of my healing, yeah.
Any other comments about where you wish this book would go, who you hope it gets into the hands of?
Yeah, I think the shorter list would be who not to get it to. Whose hands you don't want it to get into would be the shorter list.
0?
Yeah, everybody needs to be educated on this. I mean, I didn't know that this was something I was struggling with. I grew up in a good family, having this ideation growing up. And why am I going into the bathroom and opening the cabinet to see if there's any pills I can take? And when you're told, yeah, you have a great family, and so you're okay, you just sit there wondering, why am I so broken? Like, I didn't know I had a right to explore any of those feelings until I got into the adoptee community. And I mean, really, that was another step in saving my life, is getting that validation from others like that.
What I would want out of this book is for people to stop looking at adoption as this perfect solution to everything. And it's the perfect solution for the person who doesn't have children. Now they can have a child, and it's a perfect solution for the one who supposedly doesn't want a child. But nobody asked the child if that was the perfect solution. And they don't even often want to hear. There's a lot of adopted kids in my family. And I have a family member who said, well, when you talk about these things, you make me feel guilty for adopting my kids. And yet those kids might be poster children of what we're talking about as well. And from my mother's perspective, her point was she only wanted a baby because a baby was something that had a blank slate in her mind. And so they wouldn't have any issues with a baby. And so that's what they wanted. And of course, I couldn't possibly be any different than my family than I am.
Bruce, you were going to say something?
Thanks, Beth. I really hope that this finds its way into the hands of adoptive parents as well as prospective adoptive parents. And there's just not a lot of preparation, not a lot of adequate preparation for adoptive parents. And it looks like we're kind of stuck with adoption for a while here. As much as I'd like to see that shift into guardianship or just family preservation. With my own adoptive mother, it was very difficult to even talk about adoption. I could barely even utter the word. Well into adulthood, I asked her to read one of Sherry Eldridge's books, and I thought it would open up dialogue between us. And she read it, and I was grateful for that. And we had a phone conversation afterwards, and her only comment was, "Oh, I didn't know that." And it did not lead to any further conversation. And I didn't know how to carry the conversation forward. It felt like the door had closed there. And I don't recall that book dealt specifically with suicide or suicidal ideation, but even just the plethora of other feelings that we are confronted with as adoptees. Even that I couldn't talk about with my adoptive parents. But maybe this book, because it deals with life and death, would be better able to open the eyes of adoptive parents so that they know not only what they're getting into, but it will prompt them to adequately prepare for it. And Beth, you're an amazing example of this, of starting to do their own work. I know that would have been extremely valuable to me to see my parents working on their own stuff, which they never did.
Yeah. I try to think, if I had heard of this book or this concept, would I have paid more attention? I like to think I would have, but I had no idea. I tell a story in the book about calling my first adoption therapist that was sent to me by another adoptee. She says, "Isn't Joey adopted? Maybe that is part of the reason why he's having so much trouble." We're like, "Really?" I had no idea. And I'll never forget this woman. Her name's Patty Huber. She's a great adoption therapist. And she's like, "Uh-huh." I'm like, "No, he just tried to kill himself." "Uh-huh. He's running away. I can't keep him safe." "Uh-huh." And she was super not surprised. And shoot, if I would have had a clue when he was younger, when he was scratching a rock into his wrist, trying to slash his wrist when he was 7, when he was, wishing he was something different, when he was struggling, and I just was blind to it. I just think, God, if I had known a little bit more, if I had known adoptees are 4 times as likely to attempt suicide, would I have paid more attention? I sure hope I would have. And I sure hope that adoptive parents, if that's all they take in is that adoptees are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide, that's enough. Because maybe that will just wake them up just a bit and save a life. But if they can dig in a little bit more and just try to grasp a bit of this pain that I'm seeing on everybody's faces today, it's no small thing.
I know since Adam's death, we've had 3 families come to us about their Korean children who have struggled over the years, but it took a death for somebody to finally say something.
So one more comment, Beth. There's a real lack of research, I think, in this area within the adoptee community. And people keep citing this 4x times more likely to attempt suicide. And that was based on one study that was interviewing parents of both adoptees and a control sample. So we really need a lot more research, I think, in this area. There is a friend of mine, Dr. Lynn Zubov, who is currently conducting a survey within the adoptee community, not just for adoptees, but for birth parents as well. And some of the initial data that she's gotten back has been pretty astonishing. She's gotten over 1,500 responses so far to the survey. And some of the numbers suggest it had been around 25% of the respondents of adoptees had shared that they had attempted suicide.
Yeah, I suspect the numbers are much higher than that 4 times number. I'm going to interject here. This is me a couple of weeks later after I recorded this episode. And Bruce got me connected with Dr. Lynn Zubov, who he was mentioning has done this survey. And I chatted with her, and she agreed to let me put some of the preliminary findings into the book. So you'll find some more statistics in the introduction to the book. And the upshot is that adopted people, according to her survey of over 900 adoptees, adopted people are 38.7 times more likely to attempt suicide not 4 times, 38.7 times. The numbers she uncovered are pretty devastating and serious. And same for the birth mothers. They are 40 times more likely to attempt suicide. So I will put a link to her survey in the show notes of this episode if you would like to complete the survey, if you're an adoptee or a birth parent yourself. And in our book, Adoption and Suicidality, you will find some of her statistics, and she will be analyzing and creating documentation in the coming months as well. So keep an eye out for that. I think what I would like to do is, if any of you are willing to read a bit of your piece, can you just give people a little sampler?
I wrote a letter to my son the year after he committed suicide. The second year, I wrote another letter. And the 3rd year anniversary of my son's death, I wrote another letter. And this is it. This is part of it. The letter is, Dear Ray, I knew how deeply I was wounded after leaving you 54 years ago, but I had no idea how traumatized you were. Your hurt was overwhelming, and how could I not have seen that wound? Ray, I will forever remember you with positive, unconditional, and never-ending love because you live inside my heart and in my soul, as you always have. It is heartbreaking to think you must not have known how many loved you. Each night I look up at the stars and I talk to you, and this I know. Missing you for 50 years was hard, but missing you after having you in my life is shattering. If I could only hold you once more, my son, I would never let you go. For now, though, I will continue to hold you close in my heart. After all, it's a place you've always lived. I love you, Ray. Mom.
Thank you for that, Laura. I've been, editing all of your audio from your readings, and I've read Laura's piece many times, putting the book together. And then when I heard her voice reading it, I was like, whoa, that's really intense to hear those words from her own mouth. It's really, really powerful to hear. It's powerful to read too, but really powerful to hear. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Who else would like to go?
I will.
Okay, go ahead, Terry.
I'm Terry Dreismeyer. I wrote this letter to Adam shortly after he passed away. It's called I Love You Too. My heart is racing. I woke up in such a panic. I leaned over to see the time, 2 a.m., Wednesday, April 12th. The entire night was queasy restlessness. My thoughts are full of a mother's horrifying what-ifs. What is happening to you? By 5 a.m., I'm sending my first positive vibe message. I did not expect a response right away, but something's not right. Your cell phone battery is running low. I tell Dad I tried to message you. My eyes are fatigued with worry. He hugs me tightly. By 6:30 a.m., still no response from you. Dad and I headed out the door for work. Frantically, Dad and I are trying to contact you. You missed his call. And I never heard my ping. I love you too. You seem so excited about today, saying to us, I'm glad to have someone neutral to talk with, but telling me all the same things and assuring me this was not my fault. At 10 a.m., Dad entered the building, tears streaming down his eyes, unable to speak. At that very moment, I also broke down and collapsed in his arms. We lost you. Inescapable shock ran through our bodies, our lives utterly shattered into thousands of pieces. The pain unbearable, that complete numbness took over. Lost and confused about the news Dad received. Death from suicide. No words ever spoken, no goodbyes, no signs. You told us and the therapist you had no intentions of wanting to die or harming yourself. She deemed you safe to return to classes. Dad and I sat in complete silence and clung to each other, uncontrollably shedding tears. The day before I heard my ping. I'm looking forward to my clinical this week. and will get my graduate loan wrapped up for the summer. I love you too. Shouting, "This is not true, this is not true." Our cries were heard so loud as if you heard the pain of our broken hearts. Winter break was the very last time our family of 3 would be together in celebration. Now treasured memories of you. Your funeral would gather us once more.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Terry. God, it's such a painful, painful story. How are you all doing? I realize that you guys haven't read each other's work yet, I don't think.
No, we haven't. This is all new. And it's a lot.
Is that hitting you hard? I can see it. I think the way the book is structured, it's going to allow people to dip in for just short times and come back out. It's not a narrative that you have to start at the beginning and go all the way through. You can read just one of your poems or essays or one little chapter, or just go to the 3rd section where there's resources and just go grab something, and they'll be able to just drop in wherever they're able. But it's heavy for sure. Janell, would you like to read, or do you have something else to say?
I think I can read mine. I'm going to try anyways. Okay. I'm Janell Strube, and my piece is called Suicide and a 3-Year-Old. When I was 3 years old, I learned I was adopted. It was not long after that I tried to commit suicide. Not that I knew what the word suicide meant at that point. I would become fixated with seppuku, Japanese honor suicide, when I was 8 years old. But I already knew what danger meant because my adoptive mom drilled it into me every day. So on that particular day, I set out to do a few dangerous things. The first thing that I did was swallow a penny. It did not choke me. I wasn't vomiting. Nothing happened. I can't remember if it hurt going down. I don't remember going to the doctor or the hospital, so I don't think it did. I do remember looking in the toilet bowl at my poop for a few days, but I never saw the penny come out. Today, I have to wonder if this is the beginning of the non-ulcerative lesions in my esophagus or any part of the cause of my stomach problems. The day was only getting started. I pulled the sweeper cord out of the wall while Mom was vacuuming around the corner in the bedroom. A little blue fire came out of the wall and tingled up my hand. The electricity zapped and twanged up to my elbow. Still, I wasn't dead. That night, we went by car to visit some friends. I pretended to be asleep. I was thinking about what it would feel like to fall out of a moving car, how it would be, what would happen. I decided it probably wouldn't be a good idea to do it while the car was going very fast. Probably I should wait until the car was almost stopped. When my dad slowed to turn into the driveway, I got ready. Just as he turned between the curbs, I opened the door and slipped out, landing on my knees and hands at the edge of the driveway. Oh, the pain of my knee and leg when Mom poured the hydroperoxide down my leg. The scrapes on my knee and my leg went from oozing red to bubbling white, burning like fire. These were my first scars on the outside. My parents had to watch me extra carefully after that.
Thank you, Janell. The fact that you can remember being 3 and to remember those scenes so vividly, it's just so painful to hear. So painful. And I can only imagine how painful it was to live that at 3 and to continue to see that scar every day on your knee and continue to have so much pain. So sorry. Bruce, if you'd like to.
Sure, I would be happy to, Beth. I'm Bruce Porth, and this poem is about facing the fierce depth of relinquishment pain that threatened to crush me into oblivion as I was moving through another thick veil of the adoption fog. And despite working hard on a daily or moment-to-moment basis to stay alive, the poem revealed a thin thread of hope that by turning toward and befriending my pain, I might just find a way through it. The title of the poem is Maybe This Is the Way. Maybe this is the way, this descending into the fractures, this spelunking in the caverns, crushed by the narrow passages of dense rock and underwater channels, this drilling down through the pockets of compressed gas, trapped for thousands of years, this surging upward of indescribable matter, impossible to grasp, too hot to touch the continuous stream, holding on to what is unknown and forthcoming in desperation just to avoid drowning within the violent flow of what has been hidden for so long below. The terror of not knowing if I am departing forever, or how deep I am, or must go before my hopeful arrival at some small patch of solid ground at the surface of a life I can finally claim as my own.
Thank you, Bruce. There's several poems in the book, and I think the poems just encapsulate so beautifully the pain, so poignantly, the pain in a way that is very unique and powerful. Thank you. Melissa?
Yeah, I can read. I am Melissa Brunetti, and the title of my piece is What Needs to Die to Find Peace. And for context, after feeling like an actor in my own life for the first 40 plus years, to the extent that I did want to be unalive, this part that I'm going to read was kind of my turning point. And I just hope that it gives hope to some adoptees that are struggling. And just like a huge crack in a car windshield starts with a small blemish, there was no stopping the damage. I splintered and split into a million tentacles that spread across my entire view. It was painful and hard and horrible and beautiful. In that moment, I decided to find myself, because if I didn't do it right now, I felt I could lose myself forever. I discovered that my authentic self, was worth living for and actually wanted to live. But I also discovered that there were many parts of me that needed to die. Not just go away, but die. Not my physical body, but parts of me that no longer served me. These were the parts that were making me sick mentally and physically. These were the parts that were trying to get my attention so I could deal with what needed to be dealt with. Killing the parts that were killing me and integrating my authentic parts that were hidden away and shrouded in the darkness before the dawn. How exactly did I do that? I had to have a conversation with my suicidal urge. I had to stop fighting with it and ask, what are you trying to show me? And that was kind of my defining moment where I chose me for the first time in my life.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Melissa. I purposely put your piece at the end of the 14 pieces because I feel like your piece provides a lot of hope and a lot of tools. Dusky, are you willing to go next?
Here's my poem. I call it The Lie. Every blonde head makes me sad, greatly grieving, thinking how I simply told you to borrow a life anywhere you could. But that would lead both you and me to unknown alleys and secret byways, far hidden from the light of what was truly right. And I had not the strength to resist what the times did insist. You were living that supposed better life with tidy picket fence and perky ponies, but in truth, you were staring at the moon, wondering where I was and why. I was playing poker with bitter demons and turned into my own harsh inquisitor, yet no answers came to calm the night. Finding you was not near enough to soothe the ragged turmoil in your head, nor balm sufficient to heal your hurt and bind up the wounds. We could not turn back time and begin again. In the end, you took the lead, you made a choice, you gave voice to all the pain. Everyone knew why. The pretty promise of adoption is a dirty lie.
Thank you so much for reading that and for sharing that in the book. Your story is so intense and powerful and sad. Dr. Joyce, would you like to read some of the foreword?
I'll just read a couple of pieces. My foreword isn't completely finished, so this is a final, close to final, rough draft.
Final-ish. Okay.
What I tried to do in the foreword was to say the things that I was struggling with.
Sure.
So, foreword. To write a foreword for a book on suicide is tricky because for the suicidal person, there is no foreword. For the child or teen, there is only the instant wish for relief. They do not do the reflective thinking needed to make a choice. They are driven by impulse, which is incredibly sad because suicide may not have been their true choice. When Beth asked me to write the foreword, I immediately wanted to speak with Joey. I did. I told him the worries I had for his future reading of this or having others in his world read it. He did not argue about the word future, which was a great sign and diagnostic to me. He listened to all my worries and made some thoughtful changes. I still hold worries for him, but I agreed to write this as we all agreed that it will be helpful to many. The key to managing extreme anxiety and depression is regulation. Anxiety is contagious. The adults must learn to deal with regulation. The adopted child arrives with loss and trauma. We often do not know what happened while in utero: conflict, domestic violence with partner or family, emotional cutoff from the pregnancy, lack of ability and resources to make choices or to have caring adults make choices. Then the loss at birth when the child is removed to be placed in foster care, an orphanage, an adoptive or kinship home. The additional moves, if shuttled from foster care to foster care, also impact the child. By the time the child arrives at its, quote, permanent placement, unquote, which may or may not be permanent in the long run, the permanent parent has no idea what that child has been through. Take into account the disposition, personality, strength, and physical and mental health of the child, and each response to all of this is quite different. Then the same issues for the parent, thereby rendering a different outcome for each and every child. The adoptive parents may or may not have the ability, wherewithal, resources, desire to attend to this child's intense needs. Beth tells us a story of a critical moment, and thank you, Joey. Joey responds with his memories of how he felt. Beth admits that since K1, we never knew how dire things were for Joey. Joey talks about how he wanted to unalive himself. He wasn't trying to kill himself. He just didn't want to be alive in this life, in this situation. How many adoptees can understand this, even without the dire thinking of Joey and others in his position? Some say if a child lost his whole family in a car crash, everyone would grieve for and with him. But when a child loses his family of origin through adoption, people just say, oh, how lucky he, she, or they are to have a new family. This is not a reflection on the new family per se, but a look at what happened, why, and what was the response short and long term. Beth and her son seem very aware and reflective as they go on this archaeological dig into what went on over time in their adoptive family. Beth is honest about how little awareness she had about adoption psychology and what might be behind and in front of Joey's mental illness and adoption confusion and trauma. She has delved into it and is working to understand what Joey missed in his life and what she could never have provided. This is an enlightened book that admits to ignorance. Ignorance, the state or fact of being ignorant, lack of knowledge, education, or awareness. This book isn't about should there be adoption, should there be transracial adoption, should there be intercountry adoption, how does divorce impact adoption, should there be secrecy, should openness be required, on and on. These questions deserve research, reflection, and reconstruction, but this book is about what to do when adoption has already happened, to provide acknowledgement and truth and to put egos of the adults aside, to join each other in a quest to save a life that is ambivalent and unsure about living, that thinks it might be better to be unalive.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's so important to me to have an adoptee and a psychotherapist write the foreword. And Dr. Joyce, you were my first choice. Thank you for agreeing to do this. And I know that I'm at risk as an adoptive parent putting this book out. And I wanted other people around us to say, yes, this book is important. This book needs to be read. This adoptive parent certainly didn't do everything right. Many things I've done wrong, and I admit that. And I appreciate that you highlight that. I'm not trying to look like some sort of hero here. I'm trying to warn other parents, other families, other allies, healthcare professionals. And I so appreciate your honest interpretation of the book and assessment of it. And I appreciate you putting your name on the thing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's such a hard book for people to want to read.
Yes.
The title. And yet it is so important because it's the far side of the possibilities that you create when you disconnect a child and take away all of their footing, all of their solid ground.
Yep. Another thing about this book, I purposely made it short. It's only 100 pages with all these little poems and little essays. And even our part at the beginning is all little chapters. And I wanted it to be something people can dip into and grab something, and you don't have to sit and read it like it's a textbook or something. So I think it hopefully will resonate for therapists or pediatricians or teachers or all these people that run into our adopted kids all the time that have no clue about these risks. I just wonder, what do you hope people walk away with after they read your poem and hear your story?
Well, it doesn't leave out any hope for adoption itself as a path that anyone should follow. I mean, this is why I found the dismissal of adoption, or the way it's presented in the Dobbs decision, so very disturbing. It's just like, oh, you mothers don't need to worry because there are more people who want to adopt than there are babies. So Amy Coney Barrett talks about being lifted from the burdens of parenting. If this is being lifted from the burdens of parenting, my God, give me an effing break. I found it outrageous. So does it give any comfort? I don't know, but it is my truth. And I think it is the truth for a lot of adoptees.
Yeah, I think that your poem and your energy that you're bringing here is so helpful to all of us. The secrets do not help. This kind of stuff needs to be talked about. Obviously, this book is not a happy, joy, hope-filled book. It's not meant to be like, oh, just do it this way and everything will be perfect. It's more like this whole adoption thing is a big, complex mess. And sometimes it ends in the worst possible way. And just bringing light to that. And that concept of the suicidal part helped my son greatly when I heard that for the first time. And I told him, and he's like, oh, you're right. I don't want the whole organism dead. I just want a big piece of it that is so painful. I don't want this one big piece of it, but I don't want to be dead completely. So that has really helped him tremendously. He still struggles with chronic suicidality, and it's something that we're continuing to try our best to help him with, but to know that there's a part of you, and that part is trying to be helpful. It's saying, oh, I see you're in so much pain. Let me help you. So what would you say to that part, Melissa?
Wow. I mean, there's a lot to say. I think identifying those parts, and it's like peeling an onion, really. And to get to that part sometimes takes a while, and that's kind of what's discouraging. But I think just kind of knowing that there is hope, that it's not the whole person, like your son said, that wants to die. It's just parts that are so painful to look at. But there are therapists out there. There is hope out there, and you can heal. You can heal. You just have to find that healing combination for you. It's different for everyone, and it can change over time. Something that might be working for you for a while might stop working, but don't stop trying to find what is working for you or what the next step is to peel that onion. It's a journey. It's not a destination for everyone. So if you just keep looking and choose yourself, keep choosing yourself.
Bruce, it looked like you had something to say.
I just wanted to pivot on that last bit of conversation because I think it's really important. And, it's definitely important. We need to acknowledge the depth of and the reality of these feelings and open up the dialogue around it. And at the same time, as we were just mentioning, we need to talk about the ways through it, from the perspective of the people who have gone through it and gotten through it. An important transformation for me happened about 3 or 4 years ago. So most of my life, I've been haunted and stalked by this terror and these intense feelings, never quite getting an arm up, so to speak, despite all the therapy and 12-step work and reading and everything that I was doing. But I did eventually come across Dick Schwartz's work with internal family systems therapy, which you were just referencing. And that was incredibly transformational to me because I was totally unaware, totally unconscious of how blended I was with this suicidal part of me. And once I was able to unblend, not that that was an event, it's still an ongoing journey, but I definitely feel like I'm out of the woods with that now. But there was so much relief in understanding the concept of being blended and then finding tools and ways in which I could get unblended. And then realizing, that there was this very, very young part of me that was in so much pain and that had no resources whatsoever, especially the resource of self. It could not rely on me because there was no self-leadership at the time. And through IFS work, I've been able to build that self-leadership and connect with these younger parts so that they don't feel alone. And in that process, I'm also able to open them up to other resources beyond me that they can take in love and support from, and insight and wisdom. But this very young part of me only wanted the pain to end, no matter how that had to happen. I read a long, long time ago that to a child, abandonment is worse than death. And that makes so much sense to me, especially with this type of a traumatic wound that happens so early and is so profound and is so unacknowledged by the culture. So now I'm able to show up for these parts of myself and provide the safety and the support and the befriending that they were desperately craving all along.
Yes. That's beautiful. I'm pretty sure I have a few IFS resources in the third section of the book. And I definitely have a blog post about that suicidal part that I have referencing. And I also want to mention that Melissa Brunetti is also a practitioner who helps people with SMGI. Am I doing that right?
Yeah, somatic mindful guided imagery. It's a lot like IFS.
Yes.
It's very similar.
Yeah, it uses a lot of the same tools. Yeah, so we'll put everybody's contact information in the show notes of this episode, and also it's all in the book. And I also want to highlight the Healing the Adoption Constellation database, which is a list of 90 now or more practitioners who are in the adoption constellation, who get adoption trauma, who understand the pain that's involved, and who work in various modalities to help people. So please help spread the word about that database, because I hear all the time, I don't know who to go to. I don't know who will understand this. I can't find a therapist. I can't find da-da-da-da. It is really hard to find a therapist, but if you can branch out to coaches and other practitioners, it's much easier because they can work worldwide. Therapists are tricky because they're in states. They have to work in their own state. So, but there's lots of healing to be had out there for those that are willing and able. And I will list some of those resources. So it's really important to me that people can find resources. Janell, did you want to leave any bit of advice? And you're from two perspectives too. So
yeah. So from the perspective of my son, I was really glad that I was able to tell him recently that he had the right to be angry, that he had righteous anger, and that I wanted him to be able to speak to someone who understood adoption trauma. He sort of laughed at me, but then he could acknowledge that for his situation, because he came from foster care into adoption, that he was never able to get help his entire life. And, he was now wanting to be helped and get help. And he felt like even when he got help, he wanted to help others. and he wanted to speak to them, which I thought was huge. So I really hope that he gets that help and he's feeling like he's found a resource that makes him feel like he's not the only one in the world who went through what he went through, which is a really big thing for him. And, sometimes what I do is I focus on the little things of beauty. I focus on poetry. I focus on those things that are of joy and beauty until I lift myself up again. And, some days are just a hard day.
Yeah. Yeah. You're such a beautiful writer. I get your blog posts and or Substack or whatever they do nowadays, and your writing is so evocative, and it's a great tool. Great tool. Laura, do you have any advice for birth moms, birth parents?
I've thought a lot about this because I do belong to several birth mother groups. And I've thought a lot about the fact that I was so naive, and my son had things happening to him which were totally outside of our reunion. They were happening within his own private life in Louisiana. And I was aware of them, but because I didn't really know that he was as depressed as he was, because he put up the front. But now looking back, I realized there were things he said. Even my husband said to me, I'm worried about him, because he became very angry, hostile, began drinking more than he already did. And all of these things started escalating, all these signs. So I want to say to other birth parents in reunion who do know their child now, even in the best kind of reunion, be careful and be aware that this could be on their minds. Nobody had ever said to me in the past he had tried to commit suicide. Both of his adoptive parents had passed away. I never met them. By the time he found me, he had not had a mother for 18 years. And he was 49, so he wasn't a little child anymore. He was a middle-aged man. And I just assumed, since he had a great education, friends everywhere, and great life, I just assumed everything was okay. And I think I would say to any other parent, if there's any inkling that something is wrong, open yourself up and be willing to accept anger, be willing to accept the sadness, because I feel like I was accepting all that, but I wasn't aware. And that's all I want to say to people is, please, this book says it all, because it's coming from all directions, and so many people's lives are affected by adoption, whether they are adoptive, whether they're a birth parent, whether they're the adoptee. There's so many people that their aunt, their uncle, their brother, their sister have gone through this, there's some part of adoption. And that's why we need to spread the word, that be aware and take it serious. And don't just think they're going to push through, because not everyone can just push through. I would give anything to have known what I know now 3 years ago. Anything.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you. Okay. Terry, do you have any advice for adoptive parents?
I do. For adoptive parents, be proactive. Be proactive. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to sit down with somebody ahead of time and say, can we talk about things that possibly come up without opening Pandora's box? You don't want to make something out of it. Be proactive. If we had any inclination that this was a possibility in his life, we would have sat down with a therapist years ago and just kind of talk about family structure, talk about abandonment. Because there's a big thing about abandonment. We always thought Adam was orphan, meaning his parents had passed away. I don't think that's the case. I think his parents were very much alive when they abandoned him, but he was labeled orphan.
It was probably economic, right? Usually that's what's happening in other countries.
Yeah, it sounds like it. He apparently was with his biological mother and father for 4 months, and that didn't work out. And then she went back home, but wasn't allowed to bring him. We assume he was with his father at those few days, but we don't know that for sure. We have no idea what kind of care he got.
There's so much we don't know. Yeah.
Be proactive.
They give us this rainbows and unicorns view of adoption. Oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, goodness sakes. Maybe we can hack away at that superficial image of adoption and get to the real truth of the pain that these adoptees are going through, and everybody is affected for sure. I've heard a statistic that 30% of people in the US are affected by adoption. They know somebody in their close family is adopted or knows a birth family or a birth parent. And so if we can educate that 30%, and then also therapists, psychiatrists, doctors, teachers, I would love teachers to understand this better. Let's take a little extra care of our adopted and fostered kids in school. Let's make sure they're getting what they need. I'm just curious what it's been like for you all to sit in this room with each other from all around the constellation, all these different experiences. How has this been for you?
I was just thinking that I was 4 days old when I was adopted. There's still abandonment issues. It doesn't take months or 2 or 3 different households. On my son's side, I think he may have been in 11 foster homes. We don't even know how many, and lots of other trauma. There's a pain out there that doesn't end, that you just live with because it's a part of you that has been broken off. And so it's there as though a piece of your body were missing. And you have to learn how to deal with it and live with it.
As an adoptee, I want to thank adoptive parents and birth parents for coming together on this. It's one thing to hear another adoptee and hear that validation, but when we start hearing it outside of that circle, it's a whole nother layer. And so as an adoptee, I just want to thank those of you that are not adoptees that are stepping forward and helping us and telling your stories.
I just want to thank you, Beth, because this is a selfish reason, but for me to sit and hear others talk about it is so helpful. You feel so alone because even though I'm still connected with his children and my sons who I raised, are very kind and try to be understanding, they weren't his mother. And my husband's wonderful about this and gives me a lot of space and understanding. But the grief is so hard for me to even understand. It's debilitating. I've lost other people in my life. I've lost my parents, of course. I've lost loved ones. But this is a grief that is so hard to understand. And I think for you to have all of us from all these different levels and to talk to adoptees has been so helpful for me. And I just want to give back to all of them what I didn't or wasn't able to give.
Any other last comments?
No, my healing journey's just hit a month and a half ago. What's weird is when he graduated with his undergrad, we had sensed something wrong, but he wouldn't talk. And that's the first part of my letter. I didn't read my whole thing, but we had begged him to talk. But what we learned is he helped everybody else, but no one saw the signs in him.
And I think you could just wake up one day and feel like you don't fit anywhere. And that's what I was thinking about today. I could be 59, but that's how I feel today.
I think we help each other. And the fact that all of us are willing and wanting to help each other, that's huge.
Yeah, this is no small thing. It's not a small let's just read a self-help book and be done with this part. This is a lifelong journey for all of us. We're all on it, working and learning to be able to live with this from whichever angle we're at. Yes. I think it's really powerful having us all together. We all want the same thing, right? Dr. Joyce, I'll let you have the last comment.
More and more people are listening to the voices of all of the people who live in the world of adoption. And really, that's the only thing that's going to change things, because I think the people who shape it, the professionals, they have a lot at stake in terms of keeping their structure.
Sure.
It's the people that are most important. The voice of the adoptee, the voice of the birth parent, the voice of the adoptive parent is so essential.
Yes, I agree with you completely. And I'm so grateful for you who were able to be on this podcast with me, and to all of the 15 contributors besides me and Joey who wrote for the book. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We are all on this journey together to raise awareness about adoption and suicidality in the world. And we appreciate you contributors so much. And thank you to all of you who have listened to this long compilation episode. I know how heavy this material is. Again, please take care of yourself. Reach out to someone in the adoption community. There are resources in the show notes if you are looking for some more help. And just please reach out. And again, if you or someone is struggling with suicidal ideation or is thinking about attempting suicide, please call 988 in the US, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or in your country, call whatever is your crisis line. Thank you very much for listening. Please share this episode with someone you know who might want to listen, and maybe this is an easier way for them to take in the information about suicidality. And make sure and go get our book. It's out today. It's available at Amazon as an ebook, audiobook, and paperback book. Help us spread the word. Maybe get one for your therapist or for a teacher you know. Just help us get this information out there. That's what we are really looking to do with this project. You can find more information about us at unravelingadoption.com. There are tons of resources there, as well as some more information about the book there. And if you're not already on our email list, sign up there at our website, unravelingadoption.com, and you'll be notified when we have the group that I'm pulling together to help people talk about adoption and suicidality even more. So keep your eyes out for more events and groups that are going to be coming around to support all of us here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. All of the contributors of this book and I want you all to stay safe.
That's awesome.